Holy cow, welcome back to another Boxscore Geek show. I'm your host, Ray Alvarez. With me, as always, is my producer, voice of God, man of many hats, Brian Foster. Today, we'll be discussing, look, a script, finals, Ben Simmons, Brad Beal, Jonas Valanciunus, the Olympics, both Team USA and Simone Biles, and a teaser for something in the past. That's right. How's it going, Brian? Been a bit.
It's going. We got a lot going on in basketball for sure, and in the world. Yeah, we got this season just ended, and now the next season has already started. We got the draft coming up in 2 days, so Olympics ongoing. There's a lot to talk about.
Yeah, so I'll give my brief teaser first. So here's the good news, bad news. I had a very interesting talk with Dave Berri, with some what I would consider evergreen content. Although we did do what I would consider our draft covers that I'll want to do at the Box Score Geek show. So hopefully, if everything goes right, this show will go up sometime around Wednesday, July 28th, and then I will release the podcast with Dave Berri on either Thursday the 28th or Friday the 29th, basically saying we can call our shot because our draft coverage, let's just get it out of the way, Brian. I'll say that is the first thing is the number one draft pick to the Detroit Pistons, which is Dave Berri's team, is likely, tell me if I get any of the names wrong because I've not been paying attention at all, Cade Cunningham.
That's right.
And Dave Berri is very curmudgeonly on him. And I mean, I think this was very similar to you when you were talking Anthony Edwards. You're like, this is a guy in college. He's a shooting guard in college that can't shoot. So why do you want to hire a shooting guard that can't shoot? Cade Cunningham was not a productive college player. Although one I'll give you, Brian. I remember when we were talking Drew Timmy or Time, however you say it.
Timmy, yeah.
And Suggs. The good news is I believe Suggs is the number 2 freshman player coming out of school. So he is a good draft pick. So Suggs is probably a good pick. Cade Cunningham is likely not a good pick. But the bigger take, and I don't know how much I talked this with Dave, even though I've listened to it, is really you should not be using the draft to rebuild your squad. We mentioned this about your Warriors. Your Warriors, by my view, won the draft last year. In that they were unlucky, right? Steph Curry goes down really early in the season. They intentionally tank, but to be fair, what the heck do you tell the Warriors after they lose Steph Curry and Klay Thompson, right? Like that's their squad. So they tank, they get the number 2 pick in the draft. The reason they luck out is we argued the number 1 pick in Anthony Edwards was a bad pick. We really, really liked Wiseman from his high school numbers and his very, very, very limited college numbers. He's a position we like. And he was terrible last season. But what I would argue is don't give up because Sabonis, right, a recent rookie who looked really bad, I believe, for OKC his rookie year, turned out great. Some of the greatest players, including Kevin Durant, Giannis Antetokounmpo, and LeBron James were below average players their rookie season, but developed. And that's actually the point. It's to say the Warriors won the draft, but you don't have time to wait for a player to turn great. And I'll briefly turn that to talk about, my boy Giannis, who just won Finals MVP and joined a very esteemed number 34. He is now one of, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, Brian, he's one of 3 players in NBA history with an MVP, a Defensive Player of the Year, and a Finals MVP. I think it's him, MJ, and Hakeem also being number 34.
Well, I guess one thing is the Defensive Player of the Year probably hasn't been around long enough for some of the old guys.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, well, first off, right, the easy trivia trick to Finals MVP is always Bill Russell. And the reason that one works so well is, for those that don't know, the Finals MVP is named after Bill Russell because it wasn't around when Bill Russell won the most Finals MVP, most Finals. And needless to say, he would have had multiple Finals MVPs in historical NBA. He wouldn't in the modern NBA. And we actually talk about some of why that changed on the talk with Dave Berri, which will, as mentioned, will be coming out this Thursday or Friday. But, Giannis is in very esteemed company, right? One of the best ever. You could argue that the Bucks won the draft they got Giannis, but it actually took Giannis a couple of years to develop. So That's the issue, is that a bunch of people are hoping that they will draft and improve their team now. And you're not going to know if you picked well in the draft for a couple of years, which is why we think the correct strategy when you draft is to have a good team in place. And so that's actually the problem, is all of these teams are going, oh my goodness, Suggs is going to join, Cunningham's going to join, they're going to turn us around this year, Wiseman's going to join and turn us around this year. And if your team is relying on a rookie to turn them around this season, you are not in good shape. That's my draft analysis.
Yeah, and the anecdote you brought up of Wiseman is a good one because they put him out there and they said, okay, Wiseman, why don't you play like Hakeem and face up, in isolation, try to drive to the basket and all that, and he didn't do a very good job. They reduced his role and tried to get him to be more of a modern center, later in the year, but then he got hurt. So it's kind of a lost year and off season for Wiseman. So, yeah, I mean, the draft is dicey, and your overall point is 100% correct. We've always said, and this seems more true to me than ever, that the draft is like a media narrative thing mostly, right? Like we always talk about the process. The process was bogus. They should never have been able to convince the fans and the team that we need 3 or 4 years of losing. Like that's just ridiculous.
And I'll give myself a shout out. I started writing at nerdnumbers.substack.com. I've mentioned this kind of before. I much prefer blogging software that's not at the Boxscore Geeks. They also support podcasting. I did a Ted Lasso top 10 over there, so we'll see what happens long term, Brian. But I actually brought up Ben Simmons and compared him historically to Scottie Pippen, and then also what I would argue is I compared Joel Embiid to James Worthy. And so a really frustrating part when we're talking the process working is Joel Embiid has just never stayed healthy. And this is an easy other point that I brought up before too, which is relying on player health is really, really rough. And that's like Greg Oden's a great example of this. In the draft, there's no guarantee that a player you draft is going to stay healthy and develop well. So, I mean, yeah, it's get as many good, healthy players as you can and hope. And what I think is really, really important, and let's actually start talking the finals, because the finals is remarkable on many, many fronts. So first off, Brian, I would say looking at the numbers, Giannis isn't necessarily the greatest finals MVP performance. There are certainly better ones. Now, in terms of some like impressive numbers, accolades, only him and Shaq, I believe, have multiple 40-point, 15 rebound games. Of course, he finished on that 50-point game. His production was very good. It is a top finals MVP performance, but as an example, considering LeBron James as a point guard last finals, LeBron James had a more productive one, and there have been other players with more productive finals. But Giannis winning the first title for the Bucks not exactly 50 years, but 50 seasons after their last one, by scoring 50 points to do Bucks in 6, because I believe it's Brandon Jennings. I think someone asked them what they thought the Bucks would do in the series, and he predicted Bucks in 6, and that's become a rallying cry. So the Bucks winning in 6 on 50 points from Giannis, 50 years from their last, it's just one of the all times. And then of course he has an amazing highlight where he blocks Ayton. So I mean, in terms of just impactful finals MVPs, this one is up there. And I mean, I think the frustrating part for you as a Warriors fan probably is I don't think anybody is ever going to be able to take away LeBron James's coming back from down 3-1 and blocking the finals MVP Andre Iguodala in the final 2 minutes to basically seal the deal. But it's up there, and that is really impressive for Giannis.
Yeah, no feel too bad for me. We do have those 3 other titles during that window of time. That being said, though, I remember that moment and just being in a room full of people, and it was like a gut punch. Like everyone was stunned. Like, what had just happened? But yeah, I mean, this finals was pretty great. I mean, we say this every year, but I just feel like the league just keeps getting better and better and better, and each year play improves. I am baffled about how we keep hearing people talk about, oh, we need to change the rules to reduce 3-point shooting and things like that. And my response to that is, what era of basketball do you want to return to that's better than what's going on right now, right? I mean, I can't think of one. And I didn't watch the 60s or the 70s, but considering we didn't even have the full rule set back then, I can't imagine it's better. So yeah, I mean, I just really love both of these teams, all the players on them, and even the Final Four teams were really good teams too. Just yeah, this was great basketball.
It was highly enjoyable. Obviously, the Hawks are an interesting team in that they did the same thing to the Celtics years ago. If you don't recall, they gave the Celtics a scare being a much weaker team. But absolutely, the Final Four teams. It is. Here's what's really rough. To close up the thought I started the finals on. No matter how good a team is, just luck happens. And two easy examples are the Bucks and the Warriors. So the Warriors, right? Light years ahead, luck into Kevin Durant, and they only, I'll put in quotes, win 3 out of 5 title attempts, right? Which for how good that squad is, that's like that is underwhelming, to be honest. But
Well,
then
it was 2 out of 3 with Durant though,
two out
specifically.
of three with
Yeah.
Durant, 1 out of 2 without Durant.
Yep.
So it's like, yeah, and I mean, don't forget one of those two is with them having the greatest record in NBA history. So
Yep.
certainly disappointing. Now, of course, the Bucks put them to shame, and that the Bucks had the best record in back-to-back seasons and fell short. Didn't even make the finals. And I talked about this a little on Twitter, but when Toronto won, it's worth noting that the Bucks were down 4, and then Giannis on just a routine play falls over and tweaks his ankle and is pulled out. The Bucks managed to get it within 2, and then the Toronto Raptors miss a shot, and the Bucks miss an easy layup that or a rebound, sorry, not layup, the defensive equivalent of a layup. They miss an easy rebound that if Giannis was on the floor, you cannot convince me he would not have gotten. And then the bigger point of that is Giannis got injured on that play and clearly was not healthy the next game. He played terribly, and they fall to the Raptors in 6.
Supposedly his knee had swollen to be double in size.
I mean, this finals as well. He got, I think, a meniscus tear or something before the finals, and I thought it was done. And then I don't know where the hell what he did came from with that injury. So there's that. So the Bucks have had bad luck, and that's historical as well. The Bucks have had some great teams historically that have quote unquote underwhelmed or underperformed, and so that is just life. So the answer to basketball is very much give yourselves as many chances to win as you can, and understand that it's still going to fail a lot of the time, and we just are never behind rookies. But to the finals, one other annoying point to me is I really wanted the Phoenix Suns to win with Chris Paul, because Chris Paul is one of the greatest of all time, and I'd love to see him get a ring.
Right, maybe his last
But
chance. I think that is too soon to say. He may have a run next year, but people are saying, this is his last chance.
yeah, if you had told me last year that Chris Paul was going to make the finals joining the Suns, I would have been like, what planet are you on? Jay Crowder's going to come back to his old self. Chris Paul is going to keep it up at age 36, and the Suns
Bridges
are going
and
to be
Cam Johnson are going to become stars. Like all this stuff happened for the Suns. Ayton as well.
Yeah. And I mean, this season, it's really rough to know, but most playoffs have some stupid injury luck. You, with your Warriors alone, have been front and center to seeing that multiple years. I think you noted, right, with the Cleveland Cavaliers rivalry, it was kind of just they were trading injuries back and forth, right?
The year the Cavaliers won was the year Kevin Love was healthy. He was not healthy the other years.
Kevin Love and Kyrie Irving get injured the first year, 2015. 2016, Steph Curry, Andrew Bogut get injured. 2017, I don't recall necessarily if they were injuries on the Cavaliers. There might have been other places in the playoffs. 2018, I believe there were some injuries that let the Cavaliers in, if I recall. So, and then of course 2019, Klay Thompson and Kevin Durant go down.
Well, this year Brooklyn versus Milwaukee, right? Giannis gets hurt and comes back, but Brooklyn's players, didn't do as well. So yeah, I think that series was completely decided by injuries.
I'm going to take this as a brief opportunity to cross Simone Biles in the Olympics off my list by comparing it to the Brooklyn Nets series. So for those that don't know, the United States women's gymnastics team just got the silver medal, losing to Russia, which is interesting because Russia's supposed to be banned, but is what it is.
It was Russian players not representing Russia.
Sure. Fair enough. Simone Biles basically pulled herself going into the finals of competition, potentially costing her team a win. And the reasoning she gave was just not in the right headspace, which has gained a lot of vitriol from people. And I even shouted you out on Twitter noting that, you know, I was, even from people I respect, was seeing the take of, you know, these people need to, and talking about the women's gymnastics team, you know, need to just man up and play through it, basically. And we've kind of talked about in sports the kind of toxic machismo culture of, you know, suck it up and deal being really problematic. And I mean, even on your Warriors, right? Klay Thompson and Kevin Durant, we still don't know the long term impact to Klay Thompson of trying to play through injury in the finals. And you know, my 2 cents on Simone taking herself out was going, in theory, the team should be watching out. And if she's got a problem, and this is mental health, obviously, Osaka has been a big name with this recently as well, pulling out of the French Open. You know, how people respond to professional athletes with mental health issues. You brought up Kevin Love. I believe he's actually a player that I believe has talked publicly
Yeah,
about
he
that.
has.
You know, it would be nice if there wasn't so much stigma associated with it. Like, what's your problem? Just shut up and deal. When we've all come through COVID and had days that have been rough, it's very frustrating to see that. But another point I want to bring up with the toxic machismo that I don't like is there have been a lot of injuries in this playoffs that really impacted things. I noted this talking about Ben Simmons, who we'll talk in just a second. But as an example, Mike Conley was a player that was injured. He tried to come back from injury, played terribly, and arguably cost the Utah Jazz a shot at the finals. James Harden did the exact same thing. James Harden in the Brooklyn Nets series was injured, rushed back, and played horrendously, and is probably why it's probably, you know, Coach Bood needs to give James Harden like a giant fruit basket, because if it weren't for James Harden rushing back and Kevin Durant's having shaky shoes, like for those that don't know, Kevin Durant had a potential game winner that ended up being a 2-pointer, and it was essentially because his foot was on the 3-point line, and he has really big feet, and apparently he almost like a professional skateboarder wears his shoes a little looser, I guess, was what happened. So he's claiming that his shoe was basically a little off balance, and that's why he stepped on the line, because he didn't have as much control of the shoe as he wanted. So if that doesn't happen, you know, it's possible nothing happens with the Bucks. So like, players rushing back from injury and really trying has potentially cost teams in the NBA playoffs. I know the same thing happened years ago with Scottie Pippen in the Bulls' arguable first chance at an NBA title. And so comparing to Biles, I'll say that it's like, if you find yourself saying, why didn't this athlete just play through it? Don't they know how important it is? You're not going to get me to side with you. There are other considerations that I was hearing people, particularly American Numbers, aka Arturo Galletti on Twitter, noting that, you know, she probably let her team down by not pulling out earlier. She was probably potentially doing it for endorsement reasons, and that's all true. You can call a player a jerk, but if you ever find yourself saying, why don't players play through injury, both physically, body, and mentally, I'm just never going to be on your side about that. And then, as I mentioned, on the flip side, this NBA playoffs has seen multiple occasions: Joel Embiid, James Harden, Mike Conley, just to name three that I can off the top of my head, players rushing back from injury for the quote unquote good of the team, arguably costing their team a shot.
Yeah, and to use the first example you brought up, right, Durant and Klay Thompson in 2019, people talk about that fondly, like that was the right call, and that both of those players are now Warriors legends because of that. And I agree with you. That was a terrible choice. Bad for their careers, right? And it may have hurt the team. So I'll just qualify this by saying I haven't really read much about the Biles situation yet, so I'm not going to say too much. But from what I did read, she seems to be saying, you know, along the lines of what you are, which is that she made the call herself that benching herself was the best thing for the team because she was playing so crappy. You know, sports people say that's a cowardly move, and I'm not going to disagree with Simone Biles about, you know, gymnastic strategy, right? Like, I'm going to trust her more than the average pundit on Twitter.
And what's really frustrating to that note is exactly what I was just saying, is like, we both know the sports culture, you more than me, I think, because you actually have like more personal association. I think you said some of your family members coach, or
Yeah,
you at least
yeah,
know some like football
football.
coaching, and know like firsthand like the attitudes. I've never, you know, gotten that close to anything, but the attitude in professional sports of just suck it up and deal. Like I said, I was shocked to discover that Phil Jackson had Scottie Pippen with a migraine and like gave him an ice pack, some aspirin, put him on the bench for 3 minutes. Was like, come on, can we go? Can we go? It's the finals. And it's like, are you kidding me? Like, you're putting like a blind player out there, which, irrespective of risking Scottie Pippen's health, you're hurting your team. So I think that's the rough part, is that the culture, coaches in general will say, it is very rare to see coaches be on the side of the right maneuver is to bench. I recall in the exact scenario we're talking, Kevin Durant with the Warriors, like Steve Kerr was coming out and saying, like, they were telling me he couldn't get hurt more and it's fine. It's like,
Yeah, that was absurd.
it's going, the entire coaching culture tends to be on the thing of, if you've got a player that can stand up, football's been the worst, right? Players notoriously would play through concussions. You would send them out there, and we're arguing that not just bad for players in terms of player rights and long-term development, sometimes it's the wrong strategy. So
yes,
I don't know if Simone Biles is right or wrong. Being a player versus being a coach is a lot different. But I do know, unfortunately, the reality is the coaches probably are not going to pull their star going into the finals, even if it might be a better play. I know that's always a rough one.
Yeah, I didn't see everything Arturo was saying, so again, I can't comment too much. But if his point is maybe she should have realized sooner, I mean, that's fair. He might be right, but at the same time, think about the situation that put Biles in, right? Like, she's trying to go, she wants to go, and she's like, all right, I'm going to try to go. And apparently she couldn't. She, performed terribly before she withdrew. So, to me, this is just a really tough call in terms of strategy. But again, though, in terms of people outside of gymnastics questioning Simone Biles, who's the greatest of all time, that's the part where I get a little suspect. You think you know more about gymnastics than her?
Well, and also what really gets frustrating to me is, this is a job for these people. And I am really sorry to have to be like Easter Bunny isn't real kind of thing about this, but like, even going to the Olympics, please do not be so naive and childish to believe that it's like above sports and about something greater, right? You have basically traditionally a lot of the countries that get the Olympics basically have governments that take lots of public money and essentially do things that are against the best interest of their people to have this here, right? If your government is going to be spending billions of dollars on an infrastructure project, for it to be on like custom places for professional athletes to compete, that does not help you. And often, in lots of these cases, they gentrify it in the case that people that were living in those places are displaced or pushed out. And in lots of cases, there have been authoritarian countries such as Russia that have taken advantage of it. If you look at any of the economics research about the Olympics, it is not a boon for the country. There is a lot of money at stake and on the line, even for, the countries. There's a lot of other money going into it. So to say that the professional athletes should do it for love of country and for love of the game, while ignoring the fact that the Olympics are very much a crass capitalist money grab for a lot of people, is frustrating as hell. And so if you go, Simone Biles let her team down because she just wanted to get her endorsement money, sure. But this is a job. Like, I mean, for professional athletes, especially for people at the top, and I don't know gymnastics that well, Brian, but I can't imagine the lifespan is that long. It's like you get 10 to 15 years as a pro athlete, even in the ideal scenario, unless you're a unicorn like Tom Brady or Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. And if, when it's done, they spit you out and don't care about you. So
That's right.
It's really, really hard. I'm sorry that there is no example of sports in any case of telling an athlete, come on, why are you just in it for the money or your personal glory? It's like, no, it's a job for them. And it's very much, a red flag to anybody looking for a job, unless you really need the job and then you just nod and say it's okay, is the here we're family. No, a job is a job. One of our favorite books to bring up is The Alliance by Chris Ye, Ben Casnocha, and Reid Hoffman of LinkedIn. And they note in that when you enter a job, you should enter very eyes wide open and make an agreement with each other, an alliance, that's what they call it, and kind of agree, here's what you're going to get from me, here's what I'm going to get from you, and be adults about it. And anytime you run into this is bigger than just you when you're at a job, you should be very skeptical. And unfortunately, there is never a case in professional sports where I'm ever going to agree with that. So is what it is. I was going to say anything. I know we didn't do a ton on the finals. I wanted to comment on the Chick-fil-A stuff, but beyond that, any other playoffs or finals thoughts you had?
No, I mean, we're gonna talk about Ben Simmons, I guess, or we already done that. But
Oh, we're talking Ben Simmons.
okay,
In a
that's
sec,
a
for
full
sure.
topic. No, I mean, I think I got most of it in. Just I'm excited for next season, and we got the draft in the summer league coming up. I'll be watching the summer league next month.
Very nice. And I mean, Ben Simmons, like I said, the other thing people may not know, I view this as just a savvy maneuver on his part. So again, you can be cynical. I argue he is probably doing this as a smart business maneuver that I really hope Chick-fil-A capitalizes on. So after Giannis wins the finals MVP scoring 50, he goes to Chick-fil-A and orders 50 nuggets, which by the way, Brian, Galaxy Brain, maybe he's given a signal. He orders 50 nuggets, Denver Nuggets, you know, just saying that could happen, right? Right? Not giving me anything.
It
Okay,
could happen.
but
I'll give you
okay.
that. It could happen.
But anyway, he orders 50 nuggets and is basically clearly going for an endorsement from Chick-fil-A, which, I mean, for the love of God, you got a star player in a Midwest market on a brand that has traditionally had problems with a lot of conservative values that clash with the traditional NBA fan base. Slam dunk. So clearly he was trying to get something from Chick-fil-A. He even tweeted him like, can I get free Chick-fil-A for life now? So um, I would say, like I said, the cynic in me is saying he's clear. I thought at first, right? The most cynical is Chick-fil-A is sponsoring him, and this is a viral thing that they've set up ahead of time, and it just pays off. And the funny comparable I gave is, I don't know if you remember this, Brian, in 2008, when Kevin Garnett, I got it right. I always confuse Kevin Garnett and Kevin Durant, Brian, but Kevin Garnett
They're both 7 foot
wins the
tall, skinny guys, so I get you on that.
very true, and in crappy markets that underutilize them. But so Kevin Garnett wins the NBA Finals, and he's sponsored by Adidas. And I can't remember the exact slogan, but it's like anything is possible or something. And when he wins, he shouts it, but he shouts it wrong. If he shouts the slogan, that's on Adidas posters forever. He gets the slogan wrong. I said basically Giannis did the exact opposite of that. The cynic in me said, this is already in the works, right? And he was just going to order the number of nuggets that he scored to win the game if he did it, and it'd be great. But it does not appear that's the case. It appears that it's Giannis trying to make the first move to get sponsored, and so here's hoping that Chick-fil-A does bite on it. So, but that was very cool, and it's really, really hard. What I said about that is I was like, Jokic is my guy, right? Nikola Jokic, first Nuggets MVP, most impressive offensive big man since Wilt Chamberlain. This guy, he has got like horses. How can you not love this guy? He's my favorite. And then Giannis does his Giannising, and I'm like, how can you not love this guy? So damn it, it's really, really hard. Giannis versus Jokic for me now, right? Because I'm from Denver originally. I'm in Wisconsin now. It's hard to say, but love that. It's not the exact set of scenarios that I wanted, but I'll take the Bucks winning a title this way, and could not have happened to a better guy than Giannis. And we'll see if Chris Paul gets another shot.
Well, I'll temper your enthusiasm then. Giannis, let's go with a different brand here that's less Trumpist. Like Chick-fil-A is the most Trumpist brand in America that I can think of, so that might be the only downside for Giannis.
So I actually tweeted at him this, where I said, here in Appleton, we got Chick-fil-A and Popeyes right up the street from each other. So like Chick-fil-A doesn't want to bite. Come on, Popeyes, get to it. Giannis likes his chicken.
There we go.
All right. Anyway, so Ben Simmons, let's talk this briefly. I mean, the good news is that at Substack, nerdnumbers.substack.com, I have a good article on it that was calling us ahead of time. And what's really, really weird to me is that even with the playoffs slowing down, it is not tempered what I would consider. And I think there is a rift with Ben Simmons and the 76ers at the moment. Those that don't recall, 76ers, right, get upset by the Hawks in the NBA playoffs. And the last game, I think Ben Simmons took a grand total of 4 shots. And at the end of the game, Joel Embiid came out and was like, game kind of turned around for us. And he didn't say this. I think he did it like the Midwest passive aggressive way. But instead of saying explicitly, when Ben Simmons didn't take a wide open shot, he passed the ball. That's when the game turned around. But he basically called out Ben Simmons for not being aggressive enough. And people bid on this. And it's bizarre to me because, first off, if you look at Ben Simmons' offense from, I'm going to give you three things: assists, offensive rebounds, and shooting efficiency. He's been very good in the playoffs and regular season. The playoffs, something bizarre happened, and he forgot how to shoot free throws. He was shooting like in the 30s, which is atrociously bad, but he was still productive. His numbers still say he was doing well. So it is bizarre to see Ben Simmons being, the classic line we've heard about players like um, Ben Wallace and Dennis Rodman, that Ben Simmons, you're playing 4 and 5 on offense. When I'm like, I agree with you. He doesn't have an outside shot, but he's still doing things that are productive on offense. And as long as the other offensive players do their job, it should be fine. And that's where things fell apart. I noted after the series was over, Tobias Harris in the game losing game shot terribly. Joel Embiid went like 4 for 20 in a game they lost by 4 points. So again the same stupid machismo culture we were talking about. The difference between trying to play through an injury and playing bad versus saying I'm injured or not capable of playing, someone else should play. The way those two actions are treated is much different. And so it's bizarre to me that, yeah, basically Joel Embiid and Tobias Harris tried to score and failed, but it's okay. Whereas Ben Simmons didn't try and score, arguably succeeded, and people are saying that's a problem. So that's one thing. And so allegedly he's on the trading block, and there are teams that are shutting down offers. It's interesting because I saw one come through that said Toronto shot down a deal that was like for Van Vliet, OG Anunoby, and I think some picks.
And Kyle Lowry.
And Kyle Lowry. Now,
it was like the whole team.
I'm sorry. That's a win for Toronto. Kyle Lowry is a great player, but he's getting older. I looked at Van Vliet. Van Vliet's a good player, but I don't think he's ever hit star level the levels of Ben Simmons. And I think OG Anunoby, he's good, but not amazing, right? You've got three good players and a star. And this is something we always bring up in the NBA, right? You can replace the production of good players. It's not easy. It's not fun. An annoying example, right? Klay Thompson and Draymond Green on the Warriors. Heaven forbid you lose them. You can make up that production, but if Steph Curry walks out the door, you're not getting another Steph Curry, barring luck. So that's a win for Toronto, but apparently Toronto said no. But then we also, by the way, other Easter Bunny moment during the offseason with all the trade rumors, draft rumors, like take all of them with a grain of salt. You don't have to tell the truth when a reporter comes up to you and says, what are you thinking? The Toronto Raptors can use the media to be savvy to say, this is a package we rejected. And what that can really be saying is, we would like you to announce the price point for Ben Simmons for us, and we don't want to do it ourselves because we don't want to undercut ourselves. So you please go out and release this. And there's nothing that says that was the exact deal in the works or was even offered or that they rejected. So just keep that in mind. But yeah, you really cannot replace Ben Simmons is the issue. And so with all that in mind, I would just argue, like, it's weird to see his stock falling as much as it has. And another thing I noted is that he was a first ballot all defensive player this last year. He was second in defensive player of the year voting. And it's really, really weird for me because this would be like in baseball. If you had a star pitcher and someone's like, the average pitcher hits like 150, and this pitcher's hitting 100, we can't really keep him. He's a bad pitcher. And that's not even true of Giannis, right? Giannis does have an offensive game. It is so weird to me to see someone that is ranked so highly on defense suddenly just get told because he had a bad offensive playoffs that you have to trade him. And I'm seeing all sorts of weird things saying like, he's not the primary scorer. Can they really pay for him? And this just drives me batty where in the NBA, it's a team sport. And the term we use basically flat out, let's just be clear, Brian, and you didn't do this as me. We are flat out ripping off the 4 factors, but I call them the Brian bins of productivity because I like that better than the 4 factors. And guess what? We own it, not trademark Dean Oliver 2006 or whatever. The Brian bins of productivity basically say you have different things you need to do to win, right? Scoring, rebounding, passing, defense, etc. And your goal as a team should basically be to fill up these bins as best you can. And so if you have a player like Ben Simmons that is crushing it both on the implicit and explicit box score defensive stats, right? He's a great rebounder, great on defense, tall guy, people, the synergy numbers, et cetera, say he's great. So you have a player that's like filling up the defensive bins for your guard, for your backcourt. thinking you can trade that is bizarre to me. Whereas, players like, let's throw them out there, James Harden, get a pass for being weaker on defense because they're so good at offense. And it's just, it baffles me so much that basketball is the one sport where they're like, it's a team game. You got to put a team together to win. And then the second you're like, this player's worth max money, you're like, yeah, but if it's not on scoring, they're not worth it. Yay points.
Yeah, well said. That was a really good rant, and I agree with all that. It's just way too much recency bias. People are just buying into this narrative that, oh, he made that one pass, and that was gutless, therefore he's a coward, and therefore he's just not a good player. And that just makes no sense to me because I just see Ben Simmons year in and year out as a guy that I'd say, yeah, I can easily see him being a top 5 player this year, normally is, and if not, he's going to be top 10 at worst. And I guess the rationale for 76ers fans is, well, if you can't be a guy that shoots threes, you can't be a max player and one of the top 3 players on a title-winning team. And I just don't think that's true at all, especially when he's matched up with a guy like Embiid, who is a high-volume, efficient shooter. And I think they pair each other really well. And that seems to be Simmons' mindset. If I can play really good defense and shut down the team we lost in the playoffs and have 13 assists, even though I just went 2 for 4, shooting. That's my role, and that's good enough. That's where the tension is. I can see where people are coming from, where they want more scoring, but I just can't come through with that mindset for Simmons. He's just way too good at all the other stuff, like you talked about. And I think some team is going to get him for a really cheap price this offseason and really improve themselves.
And I'll throw out, this wasn't even on the script, but just briefly touch on this. So like Damian Lillard is allegedly unhappy in Portland. But here's the deal. Damian Lillard, I believe, is on year 1 or year 2. He's got 4 years left on his contract. And I just looked up Ben Simmons. Ben Simmons is the exact same. He's a 25-year-old. He's on year 2 of a 5-year fully guaranteed deal. So not even a player, not even a restricted free agent at the end. So it's just like the 76ers could actually take a page out of the Utah Jazz's book. So Utah Jazz, for those who don't recall, Rudy Gobert arguably started one of the first lockdowns of COVID because Rudy Gobert and the Utah Jazz basically all got COVID, and the NBA canceled the game with them and then shortly after shut down the league. And this was kind of the precipice of shutting down the United States last March, or 2 Marches ago. Jesus Christ, Brian. It's been forever. We'll get out of COVID one of these years. But so Gobert and Donovan Mitchell were apparently feuding, and people were saying, they don't want to play with each other. And Donovan Mitchell was the clear person they wanted to side with. So people were going, is Gobert out the door? And the Jazz just went, no, we're not going to trade him. And they didn't. And even if these two players had beef with each other, they made up and played. I keep bringing up the Scottie Pippen example that I did use in my article at Substack on Ben Simmons, where according to a book called The Jordan Rules, Michael Jordan in 1991 didn't think Horace Grant and Scottie Pippen were enough to win because they had lost back-to-back seasons to the Detroit Pistons. And because Dave Berri's research on the age curve wasn't out, Michael Jordan probably foolishly assumed that the Detroit Pistons were going to keep being good for years and years, which did not happen. They slowly aged and deteriorated, and that's why the Bulls were able to go on to win a title. But he didn't think that Scottie Pippen and Horace Grant were good enough. And Scottie Pippen and Horace Grant both had a horrible playoffs to cost them. And the Bulls just went, we're going to keep Phil Jackson and Scottie Pippen and Horace Grant and Michael Jordan. And they went out and won. And the Utah Jazz, they were an unlucky series away from making NBA finals as well. And they just kept Gobert and Donovan Mitchell, and it's fine. So the 76ers, Joel Embiid and Ben Simmons might be fighting, but they're both on long-term deals. So the 76ers can just say, we're not trading you, suck it up and deal. And we may not like it. I just talked a bunch. I ranted a bunch about Simone and just telling players to deal and play and get over it. But that's the position the 76ers are in, and that's our 2 cents. Now, again, Daryl Morey is a player that, freaked out and traded Chris Paul. I've been getting a ton of love, basically busting Daryl Morey's chops about Chris Paul with how well Chris Paul played this season and making NBA finals. So it's like, I would be worried about Doc Rivers and Daryl Morey when it comes to having a transcendent point guard that you trade for less than their worth and that you feud with. So who knows? But my 2 cents, my advice to Maury is like, unless you're getting like Steph Curry and Draymond Green, ooh, that's interesting, Brian. I think Joel Embiid is overrated. So I think Steph Curry, Draymond Green, and Wiseman for Simmons and Embiid, I think I would take as the Warriors. Or
Well,
other way around.
Steph
Other
will
way around.
never get
No,
traded.
no, sorry. I messed that up. Other way around. For the 76ers,
Oh
that would be a
yeah.
loss for the Warriors. Thank you. Sorry.
No, I think what you're saying is right, based on what I've been seeing in the media. Well, so you mentioned how Embiid and Rivers kind of dumped on Simmons, the same day after that playoff loss. All this stuff started getting dumped out in the media in the days after that as well. There's a story that came out about Simmons that he was supposed to, um, the year that Brett Brown got fired, Brett Brown got him this shooting coach he was supposed to work with all offseason. Then Brett Brown got fired and they switched over to Doc Rivers, and Simmons just kind of said, "Peace out. My brother is going to be my shooting coach this offseason." And that's what led to his shot getting so bad. I have no idea what the truth behind that story is, but the point is, it seems like the 76ers are ready for him to go and are launching a full assault in the media. And I don't know why, because that lowers his value, but that seems to be what happened.
I don't know how much we'll talk some of this because I have brought up like project management and tech, and I've been on kind of a kick on that thing about like, reading books on like DevOps and improving tech stuff, which is definitely fun. And it has been a place that I think there is a very nice bit of synergy between what the Boxscore Geeks says about like the NBA and like what the tech world says about improving like processes there. Right. There's actually a very nice like trust the process you could do about improving tech companies using some of the insights we've learned from the NBA, although we wouldn't typically say tank your product for 4 seasons and hope that you hire a good new college grad. But anyway, so when it comes to all that, though, in terms of improving teams, I've been on this bandwagon for years of just saying, or boat, I guess, for years of like, when you have productive players and you want to improve your team, why are so many people obsessed with upgrading their stars or fixing their productive players? Giannis doesn't have an outside shot. Ben Simmons doesn't have an outside shot. Can we really win with a player without an outside shot? Blah, 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 blah. Why is that what you are focused on when you have unproductive players? When like Tobias Harris has been iffy, right? Has been very up and down. You have a max player in Tobias Harris that is not worth the money, whereas Ben Simmons is a max player that's worth the money. So if you're worried about something, why are you trying to optimize a player that's worth the money when you have a player costing you just as much money that is arguably hurting your chances of winning? And there's a very funny brain teaser related to this, Brian, where you basically go, okay, you have 2 cars. You have like a Honda Civic that gets 30 miles to the gallon and like a Humvee that gets 5 miles to the gallon. And you have the opportunity to upgrade your Civic to a Prius that gets 60 miles to the gallon, or you can upgrade your Humvee to like a Ford F-150 that gets 10 miles to the gallon.
And it's the Humvee. Which do you every do? Time. It's the Humvee.
What?
It's the Humvee.
You upgrade the Humvee.
Yep.
And yeah, you're recognizing this. I'm wondering if you've just heard it before, or you just know like project principles and stuff. It's like,
no, I just know that's a principle of automobiles.
Not just automobile, but just like even industries, like I said, DevOps, NBA teams. If you like, basically the anchor of your team is what's holding your back. The worst starter on your team, the worst player that gets solid minutes on your team is what you need to fix, because we have seen this happen, right? We have seen players like Eric Gordon and Austin Rivers. You called them like James Harden cancelers or star nullifiers. It's exactly that. Like, it doesn't matter if you turn Ben Simmons into Giannis or Kevin Durant or whoever you think is better than him, which, at this point, I will say you ended up being wrong by a fairly decent margin about Giannis this season, where early in the season we were talking MVP races and I said Jokic was running away and there was no other name. You actually said Giannis at that point. You said his number, and you were right. At the time, his numbers to Jokic were similar. My reason for Jokic winning number 1 is like, dear God, don't take this from me, Brian. Now, the good news is Jokic poured on the gas. Giannis slowed down a little, was still a top 5 NBA player in terms of MVP voting. We would still have given him a vote. But I mean, just the basic point is like, you're not going to upgrade a Ben Simmons or a Giannis enough to put your team on the next level. What you're going to need to do is you're going to need to take Tobias Harris or other players on that squad. I'm blanking at the moment on other players on the 76ers.
Well, no, I think the real answer is even worse, which is almost that they were a great regular season team and they couldn't run it back with this core. Like with different luck, they could easily just win the title with this team, I think. Harris is not that bad.
Well, so actually, you are all right. Let's give this is a fun test I like to do.
Because they went to Game 7, right? Sometimes if you go to Game 7, there's no answer of why your team's bad. Your team is just good. You know?
Yeah, and actually, I just went to Boxscore Geeks, and so actually, Brian, there is one potential weakness that I want to look at for the play, which is Shake Milton. Shake Milton is pretty bad.
See, I would say just put Thibault in more, and you're fine. Thibault is just great.
So yeah, to your point, I mean, but they do have very few weaknesses, and that we've even seen teams. We have seen teams like the Warriors with Nick Young still be able to overcome it. So to the point, like this 76ers squad, you're right, could just run it back. Or if you want to improve the 76ers squad, the obvious places you would aim at are, Shake Milton 100%. Furkan Korkmaz, I hope I got that right.
Yeah, Korkmaz got too many minutes. I agree.
Tyrese Maxey, maybe. Mike Scott, maybe. And some of these players maybe even traded. Those are the players with major minutes. And then, as I mentioned, Tobias Harris, actually, Tobias Harris, I'm going to have to take back what I said. He played really well this season. I would still maybe trade high on him if you can, but it's like, yeah, you don't need to focus on
I'll take your point, though. I look at rosters more like salaries than players, right? That Harris salary is a salary you could use to try to improve the roster in theory. But Simmons, I can't see a trade they would make that would improve the roster involving him.
I mean, I've argued this forever, and I actually did start doing the research. And just as an FYI, even on Substack writing and other things, it's just time. Like a project I wanted to work on was examining every single NBA star trade and if any have worked out. And like they just don't. The one I thought had a chance was Chris Paul for Montrezl Harrell, and then the team didn't keep Harrell.
Well.
Oh yeah, and that was involved. But I mean, that's the thing is, basically, usually if you lose a star for two good players, I still argue you lose, because you could have replaced those two good players on the open market. You cannot replace the star on the open market, and so like typically for a star trade to work, you have to get a star back, and it is really, really rare for a team to both get a star back and for it to pay off, and for you not to deal with sunk costs. Namely, like a fun example is Shaquille O'Neal for Lamar Odom. Essentially, that's what that deal boiled down to. Because the other pieces got moved around and weren't great. And I argue, even if you want to say, oh, some of the players in that deal were involved with Pau Gasol. Eventually, it's like, hate to be mean, the Pau Gasol trade. There are lots of moving stuff you could have just done anyway. But, Lamar Odom, you could argue correctly, outproduced Shaquille O'Neal in the long run. But Shaquille O'Neal got the Miami Heat right back to an NBA final, to an NBA conference finals and an NBA finals in his next two seasons immediately. Whereas the Lakers, it took several years to rebuild before they were contending again, and it took some more luck. So it's just like, yeah, you're not going to trade a star. I mean, it's like it could happen, right? It just has not happened. And it's one of those where I don't necessarily see it. And interestingly enough, so Brian, I actually do, apologies, this isn't like a public place, but I do have a metric where I look at players and I look at three numbers. I look at their salary percentage, so how much salary they get as a percentage of an average team, minutes percentage, how many minutes they get out of an average team, and win percentage. So here's a Tobias Harris breakdown. Tobias Harris gets 26% of an average team's salary. He gets 12% of the average team's minutes and 21% of an average team's wins. And that's this last season where he played really well. Let's do a comparison. Ben Simmons, 23% of an average team's salary, 11% of an average team's minutes, 29% of an average team's win percentage. So like when you're talking about looking at salary, that's kind of what I like looking at. Is like, what percentage of salary are they costing you? What percentage of wins are they getting you? Look for the players below that mark and try and fix them, and players above that mark, don't worry as much about.
Yeah, and look at the Bucks. Giannis, Middleton, and Drew Holiday were their top three money guys, and they they were top 3 win producers, I'm sure, as well. Like that, the Bucks just did it the way you need to do it, right? Your big 3 have to produce. You see, this is what I see with the Warriors, for instance. Everyone's saying, "Oh, Andrew Wiggins had a good season. He's now an elite defender, better shooter, not chucking as much, passing a little bit. He's actually a player I want on the team in the future." And my response to that is, look at his salary. It's too high. He's got to be even better if he wants to justify that salary. So, yeah, that's the most important thing.
All right, I want to actually pile on to your Warriors a little with one other speculation, which, as I mentioned, Ben Simmons is available, so Warriors, go for it. The player that the Warriors, at least according to rumors, which again take with a grain of salt, that like Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, and Draymond Green have been liking, it's Brad Beal. And again, let me break down those numbers for you. Brad Beal this last season at $28,751,775. Wow, nice job, Basketball Reference going exact. He is at the weakest position, shooting guard, 23% of an average team's salary, 12% of an average team's minutes played, and 15% of an average team's wins. So, dear God, Brad Beal is not what that team needs. This doesn't have to be super long. Basically, for your Warriors, what I am really, really worried about is that they're going to give up on Wiseman too soon and involve him in a trade for a player like Bradley Beal. And the good news is, with a player like Curry, you always have a shot, Brian. But we've said light years has been dead, and if Beal is on the Warriors next season, light years is, I don't know, dead twice over.
Yeah, that being said, I was suspicious of the Brooklyn Nets being good with all offense and no defense, and they managed to cobble some defense together and might have won the title if they hadn't gotten hurt. That said, Bradley Beal is not exactly James Harden. He does some good things well, but the Warriors are one of the worst rebounding teams in the league and don't have much rim protection. He does not help them with that. And he's not even a very good perimeter defender, really. He's more of an all-offense type player. And so, yeah, if you can get him for cheap, fine, but I just don't think they're going to be able to get him for cheap.
You have Wiggins, Klay Thompson, and Steph Curry.
Well, they would trade him for Wiggins. That would be the
idea. They're thinking Wiggins?
Well, yeah, so any deal the Warriors make is Wiggins' salary plus draft picks and Wiseman, basically, to be the value. But that being said, like, if Beal is clearly better than Wiggins, but Wiggins is better rebounder and rim protector than Beal. So I definitely would want Beal more than Wiggins, but my point is that's just not. The Warriors have to make a big trade and shake things up and make a lot of their roster different. And that would be a way to do it. It's just not the top way I would pick out of all their options.
So here's the rough part. I'm looking at the roster. If the Warriors keep Curry, Green, Juan Toscano Anderson, Damian Lee, and Kevon Looney, maybe, that's pretty strong. And Beal would actually be, like, this is what's frustrating, right, is Beal would either play the 4 and
he
push
plays
Draymond.
Shooting guard, and they make Klay play small forward is what would happen.
So what you're looking at next season, and that's the problem, is I think Klay coming in, Toscano Anderson and Damian Lee were really, really good. You don't need Klay. So that's going to be interesting. I think this team could do all right, but it's going to kind of be luck and threading the needle on health. So, admittedly, turning Andrew Wiggins into Beal isn't bad, but it's going to take a lot. Here's what's frustrating to me, Brian, is I see a scenario wherein the Warriors turn into a 50-win team doing that. And maybe, we saw it this season, have a couple lucky bounces in the playoffs and, do really well. And everybody's like, it was a brilliant decision. And I'm going to argue that is not the most optimal way they could have done it. So I hate to be like the annoying person on this podcast to basically say, your Warriors may make a stupid move and stumble onto wins. But to be fair, that has been the Warriors' MO for years.
Yeah, so this Beal trade and some of the others that are rumored, it does feel like these are trades that are going to maybe marginally improve the team, but maybe not, but then give up a lot of assets to kind of tread water. And when you miss the playoffs, you need to do a lot to get to the championship contention. Like that's not just a Klay Thompson getting healthy again. That's your whole, your whole roster getting retooled. And I just don't trust their front office to do it based on what's in the media. We'll see. Hope springs eternal, but yeah, it just doesn't. I don't see the Warriors going anywhere next year. The way things
I
look
think the
right
Warriors are going to be a depressing near 50 win team next season. That's my prediction, by the way. Putting it out there.
Feels like a first round loss. Feels like
Yep.
a first round playoffs loss.
Yeah, out west for sure. Okay, I've got 2 points left on my card, Brian. Then we can get out of here. The last one is we've had our first blockbuster trade, which results in a hearty "What the hell is going on?" So the trade is Jonas Valanciunus is leaving. How am I dropping the team, Brian?
Memphis
Help me
Grizzlies.
out. Memphis Grizzlies, which is a bummer because the Memphis Grizzlies, we have been in love with this team. Ja Morant, Jordan Clark, Jonas Valanciunas, a bunch of players we love have been doing great. They look scary. They were it's weird to use the phrase bubble, right? Bubble meaning the introduction of the play-in tournament with the bubble is stupidly confusing because for those that don't know, in like professional tournaments like poker is a good example, the bubble is what is known as the range right before making the money. So if you play in a poker tournament, the usually the top 20 or 30% get some money. And so the bubble is when they're like 35% left. So you have all of these people really, really, really trying really hard to get in to that money to make a little money. And some people go home disappointed. So the Memphis Grizzlies were a bubble team in the sense of trying to get into the playoffs. But then, of course, the NBA bubble makes that a confusing phrase. So that's what I mean when I say bubble team. Grizzlies were a bubble team. And here's what I would say is, so they traded for Steven Adams, who was a player we've traditionally liked and we still think was a productive player last season, and Eric Bledsoe. Eric Bledsoe is much more fascinating because he was an above average player that we really liked on, say, Phoenix, that looked really, really good playing next to Giannis and Coach Bood man, Milwaukee. Can't believe I right in my backyard and forgot the name, Brian, on Milwaukee. But he's now in his 30s. He's had a lot of wear and tear, thanks to the Bucks actually playing a lot, and has not looked good. And whereas on paper, Jonas Valanciunas per minute is a star, the one problem is he never gets the minutes, right? On Toronto, we thought he was a star. We thought they cost themselves in the playoffs once against the Cleveland Cavaliers because they didn't play him enough. Nick Nurse came and said, I love Valanciunas. I love him taking threes. We said, oh, this is great. Nick Nurse is going to play him a lot. Nick Nurse didn't play him a lot, and they shipped him out the door for Marc Gasol. And it's funny, Marc Gasol is this case that, we've been talking about these teams where it's like, you can get by what you're saying with 76ers, right? Like the 76ers can run it back with some mediocre play with Tobias Harris or mediocre players. The Toronto Raptors were strong enough that they were able to win in spite of Marc Gasol being old. Marc Gasol was very productive when he was younger, but he was older, so he was not what they needed. But so they shipped out Valanciunas for Marc Gasol kind of needlessly. Then we really liked how Jonas Valanciunas, looked on Memphis, but then they still didn't crack 2,000 minutes. So like, the hope here, by the way, is New Orleans looks pretty good, right? LaMelo Ball, a couple other good players. Zion, right?
This looks also like, not LaMelo.
Well, did I get the wrong one?
Yep.
I thought I said LaMelo, but I say
LaMelo is on on Charlotte.
Oh, yeah. Okay, so which Ball? Oh, yeah, you're right. So
Pelicans.
Lonzo Ball was traded to the New Orleans Pelicans for Anthony Davis. LaMelo Ball. Who's LaMelo Ball on? Charlotte. There we go. All right. Thanks, Brian. Got me all arranged. Is there going to be another Ball in the league too? Right? There's another son, right? As far as I know.
Yeah, there's another brother or two, but I haven't heard anything about them being good enough to make it to the league.
So we'll see. But anyway, basically, Lonzo Ball if he can stay healthy, Zion if he can stay healthy, Jonas Valanciunas if he can get minutes. This team, the Pelicans look pretty good. It's just a matter of if they play him. So our 2 cents is on the first blockbuster trade of the offseason, the New Orleans Pelicans win.
Yeah, I agree, and I've actually changed my mind. I liked Memphis' side more, but I'm with you. The big thing about it, well, so first of all, here's what we always say about trades. Who gets the best player in the deal? It's definitely Valanciunas right now. The one thing I'll say is that Bledsoe and Adams both were top like all-star level players as recently 2 seasons ago, and just kind of ate shit on a really bad Pelicans team this year. So they could bounce back despite being older players in their 30s. It looks like they're planning on keeping Adams and having him be part of their team and getting rid of Bledsoe. So that'll be interesting to see what happens there. What it looks like is Memphis did it just for the assets. They upgraded from the 17th to the 10th pick, and then also picked up an extra future first round pick. So they were typical, kind of Memphis asset kind of deals. But yeah, in the end, it does give New Orleans the cap space to pursue someone like Kyle Lowry, who they've been rumored to be pursuing. So if
that would be nice.
Yeah, if they take Valanciunas, get another top guard with that salary slot, New Orleans could look pretty good. I have no idea why they were so bad on defense last year, with Lowry and Adams, and Lonzo Ball for that matter. I hope it's not just Zion and Ingram, their top two guys, are irredeemable on defense. But we'll have to see. Any team that has Zion is an exciting team that I want to see more of.
Yep. And you just got to get a star and surround them with good pieces. So we.
And Memphis, it looks like Jaren Jackson is their center of the future anyway, and has been. So.
All right, love it. All right, very last one, then we can get the hell out of here. The NBA the U.S. men's team underperforming in the Olympics. There's a few very easy points. This last season, the MVP was Nikola Jokic, I believe Serbia. And then Giannis, of course, finals MVP, who is from Greece. He's a two-time immigrant, right? Because he's an immigrant to Greece. Or his family.
Yeah, he was famously stateless until he was 18 years old when he finally got Greek citizenship despite being born in Athens.
Yeah, so his family immigrated to Greece. He lived there. Now lives in Wisconsin. So anyway, basically international players have gotten really, really good. That's one. Two, the players that the U.S. men's team brought over, don't forget they're being run by the Colangelos, the team that tanked the process essentially.
That's right.
So, I mean, like, as an example, this is mean, but like Devin Booker shouldn't be a player that you call up. Kevin Love, I love him, shouldn't be on the men's team anymore. He's beat up. Yep. JaVale McGee, love the guy, old and beat up, right? Like, and also to that point, JaVale McGee's the only center on this freaking squad.
Well, they have Bam Adebayo also. They do have Bam.
They do have Bam? Why
isn't he Bam's the starter. Bam is the starter.
I thought they didn't have... I'll have to
no,
look at the
they
numbers.
Famously stole him away from Nigeria and then lost to Nigeria in the prelims or the friendly.
Really?
Yeah.
All right.
So, even though Bam was playing for the U.S. Yep.
That's bizarre, actually, because I've been seeing people comment on like lack of a good center, but Bam is a really good center.
Well, my comment's going to be I think that's overrated. I think McGee and Bam is enough if they play him enough minutes. So I'm not too worried about losing to a really good France team.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's with Rudy Gobert. So regardless, I mean, it's just not the best players. The international competitions has looked better. Friend of the show, Ty Willinghams, if you follow him on Twitter, has been noting, just like if you compare the numbers, this team is really more commensurate to the 2004 team that lost. And I think Devin Dignam on this show was noting that kind of international ball in the United States kind of, just follows an ebb and flow, right? We get really invested. A bunch of players team up. We kick ass. Players get older, more beat up, don't want to play, right? Team gets a little weaker. We get quote unquote embarrassed, and there's a renewed vigor, and the team gets better. So we're just on that. If we're talking, this is almost like an economics boom bust cycle. We're just in the bust cycle, and international ball has gotten a lot better. So I do kind of hope that it contributes, right? The name and likeness rights, international players doing better in the draft, stuff like this. I hope actually leads long term to like the United States doing a better job developing our talent, because I've noted that like the NCAA is not a good development program for our top talent. International squads being able to put up competitive players kind of shows that.
Yeah, I agree with you on the good and bad luck part. Like Steph Curry is hurt, so he's not playing. There's other players as well. And like you said, Devin Booker, he's not the only guy coming straight from the finals. Drew Holiday is there as well, and I think
Kevin Durant played a ton of minutes, right? I mean, played to Game 7, so it's like...
Yeah, so they're just kind of bad luck that these players they're depending on are completely exhausted right now, and others are not available. So I'm not too worried, though. I think they'll be fine and probably still win the gold medal, but I wouldn't be surprised if they didn't. Spain's looking great, and that's just the way it goes, right? The term they use in the Olympics and in World Cup is the golden generation. Argentina was great, and now all those guys are old and retired, except for Luis Scola, who's still around in his 40s, all gray-haired. But for all intents and purposes, right, that Argentina great golden generation is pretty much gone. So, yeah, that's going to be the way it goes. And to your point, though, getting rid of the Colangelos is probably the biggest thing they should do for recruitment. And I'm not sure if Popovich and Kerr being the coaches is good or bad. They're clearly good coaches. I have no idea if they're good for recruitment or not, which I think matters most.
Well, that's what's interesting. I mean, I actually was heading to shout-outs, Brian. So my shout-out is LassoCon was a hell of a lot of fun. Thea Newcomb, I believe is how you say her name, put it on with some input from our boy Chris Ye. Was a heck of a lot of fun. Was a virtual convention for Ted Lasso right before season 2 booted up. Already caught up on season 2, the one episode that's been released. Super bummed that it's once a week, but that's fine. It'll be okay, Brian. We'll live. So what I was going to say on that is I went to LassoCon, so that's the shout out, and was a lot of fun. And then I also wrote an article about Ted Lasso, very much classic crack style, a top 10 list. And I compared Ted Lasso to Greg Popovich because I basically said, this is a guy that's really great at development. For those that don't know, early on in Ted Lasso, he's like, I don't care about winning and losing. And that's Greg Popovich in terms of playoff wins and losses, underperforms relative to the strength of his squad. So it's like, Greg Popovich is a great player for developing a squad. Is he the coach you want on a team that is just playing in a tournament where you're not developing players? So I don't know if he's the right one. So shout out to LassoCon, and then of course my own work on Ted Lasso. I think that's all I got there. Brian, you got any shout outs before? Otherwise I'll hit us out.
No, I got no shout outs. Let's get out of here.
No
shout out to
shout-outs.
you for coming on the show. It was great.
Glad we made another one. Sorry to kind of go back to that bi-weekly, bi-monthly or whatever, just COVID land and a lot of stuff, and it's kind of nice. It was nice to be kind of busy for the summer, to be getting out and about, Brian. I really hope we're not all locked back up indoors.
I will give one shout out. I'll say shout out to the NBA talent evaluators. There's actually a lot of 3-and-D players up in the lottery that are going to get drafted on Thursday, and I've been paying attention to them. That's great. Like, I think maybe the NBA talent evaluation's turning the corner. We'll see.
I'll ask your opinion when it's done, because I actually put out a tweet today that was the exact opposite, where I was like,
"Oh well,
no faith in NBA talent."
James Bouknight is rising up the board, so maybe that's maybe that's against the 3-and-D mindset. We'll see.
All right. Well, awesome. If you found us not through the website, you can find us at boxscoregeeks.com. You can find me most places on the internet as Nerd Numbers, including Substack. Co-host Brian Foster, you can find on Twitter as Boxscore Brian. You can find the show, the Boxscore Geeks Show, Stitcher, iTunes, all places podcasts are found, as well as twitch.tv/Nerd Numbers for live shows, which we never announce because I'm never regular on the scheduling, and then YouTube for YouTube channel Nerd Numbers for the recap. I think that's everything, Brian. If not, we'll just have to say it next time we record.